Hello, I'm Chris Moon, a fellow artist manager, and I'll be your guide through tough love, adventures in artist management. Have you ever wondered who the people are that guide the careers of your favorite artist? We're here to shine a light on artist managers and learn who they are, what makes them tick, and hear stories and insights from their various adventures. Today we speak with Joanne Setterington from Indoor Recess. Joanne started out in public relations, and like so many of us, stumbled into artist management by accident when she discovered the band the Strumbellas. We chat about her journey, how her role in PR influences her as a manager, and how passion is often the driving factor in being an artist manager. As we dive into our conversation, I wanted to mention that the service that I typically use to record wasn't playing nicely on the day that we spoke, so we had to move to Plan B and use Skype instead. You'll notice overall quality of this episode isn't quite on par with what I aim for, but the quality of the conversation more than makes up for it in the end. I hope you agree. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Joanne.
Hi, I'm Joanne Setterington, and I own a company called Indoor Recess, which has two components, Indoor Recess Management and Indoor Recess Public Relations. And I focus on the management side, which includes the Strumbellas, Days Are May, and Long Range Hustle.
Awesome. Thanks for taking the time to chat today.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you and I go back a ways. I'm trying to think. We probably initially met when I was managing Josh Rouse, I want to say in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day too. I think we met at the Yard Dog at South by.
Oh my gosh, wow.
Yeah, when Josh was playing, I had just started working for Ryko Palm at the time, so that would have been 2000.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, he was playing like an afternoon, one of those fantastic afternoon gigs that the Yard Dog, I think, used to have at South by. I don't think if they still do.
Yeah, I'm not sure because it's a little bit off the beaten path. It was definitely kind of the precursor to the standard day party fair that happens at South by. But I remember it being quite the honor to get the opportunity to play there because that was almost the only thing that was going on during the day back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Way out on like South Congress, like that
exactly.
was the only place you could go to see that. And now I think you can almost, in fact, I think I have in the last couple of years just been a daytimer at South by, which is not the case of years past, but I think it's hard to be both a daytimer and a nighttimer at South by, and they've really kind of made it conferences that can be for both sides of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I catch a ton of music, do a ton of business during the day, and then by 10 o'clock I'm done. Bravo for anybody that can start around noon or 1 and go until 2 or 3 in the morning, day after day. That's a challenge. It's a race for sure. But yeah, so when our paths crossed when you were working at Ryko Palm and you were doing publicity for Josh, if I recall, in Canada, correct?
Yeah. Ryko Palm had just opened, I think, probably about a year before I came on board. And I had been kind of trying to figure out what I was doing and had a couple of different publicity jobs, both for other people and started my own company and just hadn't really gotten my sea legs for that yet. So the opportunity came along to jump on board with Ryko Palm. I loved the entire Ryko Disc catalog. Arthur Mann that started Ryko Disc I just spoke to him yesterday, actually, is one of my biggest mentors and loved everything that he had done. And so and I also had my sights set on the U.S. and sort of trying to figure that out a little more as well. And so that was a great opportunity to do that on the PR side.
Yeah. So your history kind of initially pre-management was in PR, right? For the most part, it's kind of where you cut your teeth. I always love, and it's fascinating the more I talk to various friends and managers that, nobody for the most part says, I'm going to be a manager. And they just start doing it. It's usually kind of by accident, or you kind of, some point stumble into it, unbeknownst, and unprepared. Well, not unprepared, but, not with intention typically, in a lot of ways. And I honestly feel like in some respects, with everybody's path being somewhat unique, that's what makes, for some great perspectives and great managers, to be honest, just taking it from whatever core element and experience they had in the music industry, and then tapping that into a management role. It just feels like it's such a great path and a unique path for everyone.
Yeah, I sort of refer to it as, with the way that it happened for me, as a teen pregnancy, where it was totally by accident. And, probably about 3 years after it, you're like, okay, this is actually really good. This is great. I got this, but I do think that everybody comes at it from different perspectives. And I think that somewhat, I think you're sort of like in that same way. It's like you're meant to manage the artist that you end up, that's attracted to you, maybe from what you did before that, or, we just have those same sensibilities and you end up with the artist that you should, because that's the type of manager they need.
Right. I mean, that kind of goes to the heart of, it's really hard to define what an artist manager does, especially for people outside the industry at times. And that the relationship is such a unique and key one. You kind of go down an interesting path saying accidental pregnancy in a sense, because in a way it's an intimate relationship, and because of that, the way you characterized it there, saying that, you kind of find who you're supposed to be with in a sense. I hadn't really ever thought of it that way, but that's very true. I mean, it's there. Obviously you could go down a thousand tangents on the dating relationship, husband, wife, or, couple scenario of this. But the reality of it is it's always, unique and, in a sense, and it's usually not something that you can be too methodical with or go out and find.
No, exactly. And I actually just had a breakfast meeting with 3 other managers this morning, and, you do kind of compare notes a little bit on, oh, you do it that way. Oh, this is how we do this. And, it's sort of, you all get to the same thing, which is people being on stage or recording or releasing music or whatever that is. But the pathway to get there, is really kind of unique with each. It's unique with each artist that's on your roster as well, I think. You don't have the same relationship with everyone. It kind of finds its own way and into like a comfortable little nest.
Right. No, it's so true. Well, that kind of leads me to inquire, like, at what point did you realize, oh my gosh, I'm going to do management. This is the role I'm doing or whatever. I mean, what was that epiphany moment, considering it wasn't a track that you necessarily set out to do?
With me, it was the moment when I realized I didn't want anyone else to manage the Strumbellas in my case. I had gotten this, it's 10 years ago, this fall actually, the lead singer, Simon Ward, had reached out to me with this ridiculous email that was all different kinds of colors and capitalized letters and uncapitalized letters, and just this sort of note asking me to come and see them play. And of course, I get tons of those as a PR company, which is what I was at the time, an indie PR company. And so I responded. I listened to them on MySpace, of all things. That doesn't exist anymore, I don't think. And went to see them play based on that. And at the end of them playing, I was like, "This is great. Like, let me know when you've got an album that you want to work on." And I'm happy to come on board as a publicist. And that just sort of led to us having, coffee a week later, and then more conversations. And, they just kept asking me questions and asking me about management. And I gave them a list of managers that I thought would be great for them. And, then they started sending me some new music, and Simon kept talking to me more and more. Then I started to feel like I didn't really want them to call any of those other managers at a certain point. I was like, oh no, what is this? Because I have a lot of respect for managers. but it's certainly not something that I sort of ever saw myself doing. Being a publicist, you are quite close to the artist and close to the creativity and to that center of a project because you get to set up so many of those intricate and integral things to an artist's career. So, that's quite satisfying, but you don't have to have the calls at 3 a.m. necessarily when,
Right.
they've missed a flight from overseas or something. And so you kind of get to leave it a little bit to the side a little bit. But I got to the point where I didn't want them to talk to any other managers. And so they asked me one more time and I was like, I just want to manage you, but I don't know what I'm doing, and so
Is that okay? Can we figure this out as we go?
very transparent, and I think that that's what they would say, and everyone else that knows me too is I will just fess up as soon as I don't know how to do something. But the drummer Jeremy Joyce did something really wonderful a few years ago when we were kind of finding our way into the American market through a deal that we were going to do where we were going to be our own label, and I kind of presented them with some ideas and I said, listen, like I can help you like look after the label stuff, but again, like I don't know what I'm doing. So, and he said, what, if there's one person that I'll follow through fire after they say they don't know what they're doing, it's you, which was really awesome because, we'd been working together for probably like 4 or 5 years at that point. And, it is always learning, and you just have to figure things out. And again, it's different pathways and different experiences. And, they've been really great to do that, and I felt the same way when I became a publicist. I didn't go to school for that. I have a history and a sociology degree. So, you kind of just one day are like, okay, I think this is what I am. But for me, it takes a little while to sort of have that kind of self recognition, I think.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's usually kind of almost like an epiphany moment where you're like, oh, I think, yeah, I've been there. I know exactly what you mean. Like, oh, I think I can state this, I can say it. And I love that you touched on, the kind of honesty and humility of this role. Cause I mean, I've met, at least earlier in my career in particular, I was fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of really good mentors too. And a lot of them are rooted in that place of honesty. And that was a trick I learned really early on, where it's like, okay, admit when you don't know something and, know somebody you can reach out to humbly and ask for assistance and help and guidance. And that's so important and so much better than trying to fake your way through it, because that erodes trust, which is also such a crucial element of the relationship. And that's what makes, I think, any relationship get to a place where, okay, we're on the same page. We might not know what we're doing, but I'm going to, trust in you to sort this out and we'll work through it together. I mean, that's, again, this goes back to that kind of intimacy and ability to have that sort of a relationship. And artists
Exactly.
and managers, relationships are really kind of rooted in that. I mean, I can honestly say, I was working with an artist here for a short period of time with a friend of mine, co-managing, and we both just actually stepped away from that relationship this week. And it was based around the fact that, there was trust issues there with the artist, and the communication wasn't what it needed to be. And at some point you just have to kind of, take a step back and go, what's best for this artist, and ultimately what's best for me, and am I in the way, or are they going to be able to guide their career in the direction they want to go? And if there isn't the ability to have a discussion, to communicate and work through it, and if you aren't coming at it from at least from my perspective, I like the team, component of it. I see it as kind of like a partnership in a way. There's different styles of management. There's definitely kind of the executioners, if you will, just kind of taking a vision and executing it. But I always found that, at least the way I like to work on the management side of things, I see it and view it more as a partnership. I think it's a richer relationship, and I think I learn more that way. And ultimately, I think you get better results and move, the ball down the field a little quicker when it's a collaborative effort. That's a hard thing to strike. So let me ask you this. How do you feel, or what's the difference from managing, say, a band versus a solo artist? Have you had some experience doing both? Because I mean, they're different flavors and they present different challenges.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of my best friends, he only manages solo artists, and I feel like my company tagline has to be like 5 people or more needed. Like all 3 bands that we manage um, have 5 people or more in them. One just went down to a 3 piece actually, but so I function well in that kind of dynamic, I think.
Mm.
And it is quite different, like there are problems or there are challenges with each, and I think that I've I managed the solo career of a couple of people within the Strumbellas as well who do other things. And that's a different relationship as well from the way that it is within the band, So with a band, and the Strumbellas are very democratic, and everything is discussed, and but that's 6 people. So when I send out an email asking one question, there's at least 6 replies.
Right.
And really to kind of get to like that end point, there might be like 42 replies, if everybody has to sort of have that conversation. And you have to be like open to that kind of environment where, there is that discussion and that kind of like looking at things from different perspectives and then coming to the best thing, for the whole. And what I always try to like get the artists that I work with to envision is that the band itself, whether it's called the Strumbellas or Long Range Hustle or whomever that is, that's an organism. And how do you keep that organism alive? And it's through, really having it have its own life. So each individual person has their life, but when we're talking about the band, it's like, what's the best decision for that band? And that kind of keeps everybody focused because you won't get very far down the road if it's 6 people or 5 people all working schedules and jumbling everything around. And so with bands, it's a lot about communication, systems, protocols, making sure the vision is the same for everyone. And that kind of just helps you. We just have ways that we make decisions with the Strumbellas and with Days Are May, that I work with that keep us rolling because we use the same sort of set of criteria when making a decision, and that's a little more than with a solo artist. You have a little bit of a more fluid relationship where you can take the time to be like, okay, how do you feel about this component of this? It doesn't have to have such strict sort of sets of criteria, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The discussion can kind of move in different ways. And I think that both have their challenges, but also have those attributes that are really strong and good as well.
Yeah, no, it's almost like you have a playbook to work off of, or that set of criteria, as you mentioned, on the band side, that you kind of probably lean into and use as a guide. But you're right, yeah. For a solo artist, they have the ability to be a little bit more flexible with what that guidepost might be, so to say. So yeah, I've only worked with a handful of bands myself. For whatever reason, I've kind of gravitated towards solo artists in a way. But again, liking the team element component, I always, the grass is always greener, right? But I've always kind of looked and said, oh man, I would love nothing more than to work with a band, if anything, for that challenge, in a lot of ways. But I love the way you laid that out, because it is definitely there's stark differences and there's advantages and disadvantages to it. It's not necessarily more challenging. It's just a different flavor.
Mm-hmm. I think that also like financially and so forth, there are, when the Strumbellas get on a tour bus, there's already 6 bunks taken,
Right.
And a crew is usually going to be at least 2 people, if not 3. Like, so there's a lot of logistics that go into things that everybody, if you are in a band, have to be willing to, like imagine if I had to ask every single person what time of the day was good for a flight for them. We kind of have to just have, hey, if they're outbound flights from your hometown, and you're flying in the day before, we try to make it late afternoon. So, so we sort of have
Hmm.
to have rules like that so that everybody's comfortable and then, moves forward with it. And that seems to work well with bands. Whereas, with a solo artist, I'm sure it can be more dependent on what it is they're doing. And, you're only asking one person. So I think everybody has to have that willingness to kind of chip in and be a part of that process. Um, which I think people find comforting too, right? It's like, okay, we just know this about flights or
Right.
meals or, that sort of thing. And, people really, I think, enjoy that at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the life of an artist. I mean, every day is different, and there's certainly norms that kind of pop up. But the more that you can put some consistency in place, the
Hmm.
easier I think it becomes to tackle the more creative and challenging pieces that pop up on a regular basis. Speaking of which, I'm just curious too. I mean, how do you? I mean, we talked a little bit about the logistical components of things, and a lot of artist management is just kind of, it can be kind of dry, and it's just executing, like I said, like booking flights and things of
Yeah.
that nature. But how often do you get a chance to kind of get into the creative process, and not just like artistically, but even within the business component of it. I mean, I've always viewed artist management as a fairly creative business to begin with.
Hmm.
And by that, I mean, trying to come up with marketing ideas, or looking for, depending on where your artist is at, looking for potential support opportunities and things of that nature. That's where creativity kind of begins to overlap with the business component. How often do you get a chance to kind of dig in on that side of things with your artist?
I think the question is when am I not? I think, and I think that I think again that's about the type of artist that wants the type of manager that I am. Like I feel maybe it's because of my background in PR and I'm also creative on my own in different ways, so that just comes into it. With the PR background that I have, marketing and so much is driven in an artist career by the artists themselves these days that I spend a lot of time working with them to roll out social media campaigns, video ideas, all of the marketing, everything. And I love that. And I feel like that's a real privilege to be able to be sort of all both feet in and neck deep in all of that. I love that. Um, I don't think I could function any other way. Because that's what I thrive off of, and I think as a manager, you have to be the one that goes and delivers this to everyone else, whether it's talking to a promoter or your booking agent or the label, other managers, whatever it is, like you have to wholeheartedly understand and believe in the music and in the project to be able to go out there and sell it, for lack of better words,
Right.
um, to everyone else. So I'm, the Strumbellas and all of the bands have been, they're very gracious with, because I do think that's a privilege to be able to be a part of that. I love nothing more than, waking up and having like a fresh demo from somebody that I listen to. Like I could see any other email in my phone, and if there's like a new demo from someone, I'm just going to listen to that probably 10 times before I move on and do anything else. I love it. I love that. I love sort of seeing that kernel of something and then seeing what it becomes. It's just whether that's, starting to like envision what the album's going to be called and then how that works out into like the cover art or a kernel of a song and that becoming the whole thing. And then we get a producer involved and like, or on tour, and envisioning some part of the show that's, just in an infant stage as an idea and then watching like a whole crowd somewhere like Bonnaroo or something react to it. I love that. I really love that.
Right. No. Yeah. I mean, you touch on something I think which is key to that relationship between an artist and artist manager too, is like just being a fan first and foremost. I know that's kind of where I've always come from too. Like, and you mentioned getting calls at 3 a.m. I mean, the other analogy I like to toss out there when I'm trying to figure out if I want to get involved in whatever capacity with an artist, whether it's consulting or managing, I've got to be able to wake up, or I got to be in a situation where, you know, I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm thinking of ideas, like, and that touches on the kind of the creative moment too, an aspect of artist management. I mean, I love when, you know, I wake up at 3 a.m. and I'm like, oh, this particular song would be so good to pitch for this TV show or something like that. Just
Right.
kind of those moments where it's like something subconsciously is going on in the back of my mind where I'm always kind of ticking away at this, and then certain things kind of rise up out of that create opportunities potentially to kind of keep everybody on their toes and hopefully move things forward. It's that kind of level of creativity that I think is primarily rooted in just being a fan. You know, it's not necessarily transactional as much as it is coming at it from a not dissimilar place probably than an artist when they create music in the first place. It's like, I think this is kind of good. You kind of like it too. How do we, you know, get this out into the world together in some capacity? That's kind of the basics of it in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think an honest fan is what a manager needs to be, you know, because I think that, you know, it doesn't do anyone any good to placate someone. You know, it just hinders the process. So there's, you know, there have to be some really honest conversation. And I think that that synergy that you can get going in that relationship with an artist where they'll send you a demo and you're like, yeah, I like these parts of it, or oh, that's really cool. Those lyrics are really awesome. Or, I don't, you know, maybe go back and try that one again. You have to be willing to be honest and, you know, sort of, again, like back to being a publicist. I'm the one that has to say, like, you have something in your nose, you know, before they go on TV. Like, and you have to say it in a way that's comfortable and safe, and they feel nothing but, you know, thankful that you're honest with them. And it's sort of like it's a safe place for them to be because they know that you're going to tell them the truth, and it's always going to be to make things the most thriving, you know, place for them to be able to create their art from. Because art is hard, you know, like I think what artists do and go out there and say for the rest of us is incredible. Like the letters that we get from fans, you know, the band Strumbellas tease me about those a little bit because like I'm always the one like crying, sending them fan mail going, can you send this guy a t-shirt? And like, you know, like we always try. They do such a great job at meeting people at shows and taking time for kids and stuff like that. And I love that part of it where someone can say like, these lyrics in this song made me happy today, or made me feel better, or, you know, all those sorts of things. That's just the most incredible thing, you know. So and artists say things out loud that we can't.
That's a great way of putting it. And that's so true in so many ways. I mean, music is especially live performance is such a unique art form when you get down to it, because it's you know, most art, a lot of art at least, I'm thinking theater even, or certainly film, it's kind of spelled out for you, but there's so much interpretation that can come out of you know, the lyrics to a song or just the music, the way you experience it. And because you have the ability to go and tour and perform that in front of people, it evokes a desire to have some connection. And we certainly live in an era where that connection point is easily attainable through social media, through an email. And because of that, I think it is, well, I mean, you know, certain artists might view it as a blessing or a curse, but if you can wrap your head around it and engage with it in a meaningful way, I think it can really fuel both sides of that equation in a way. It can hopefully give you fuel to understand how people appreciate and are connected to what you're making art wise, and likewise, obviously, in this day and age where music's omnipresent and easily accessible, taking a moment to have a conversation or connect with somebody in person or even online through social media creates a deeper relationship point. And there's a lot of noise out there and a lot of distraction points. And ultimately, you want to be able to get above that noise floor and have that connecting point. So there's hopefully some longevity, that comes out of that. I was just also thinking back to, the duality of your role of, stumbling into artist management and then having, a consistent career in doing PR. I imagine you have an interesting vantage point because you get a chance to see a wide variety. You get under the hood, if you will, be under, to a wide variety of marketing campaigns and how a wide variety of different artists tackle these things. I got to think that that's probably a great, opportunity to learn and germ a little bit off of what other people's, tendencies are in those capacities. Totally. And riff on it or build on it or that kind of thing. I that's one thing that managers have a tendency. I'm definitely guilty of this. You kind of get tunnel vision or you get stuck into your own thing for a moment and you kind of not necessarily dig your heels in, but you kind of just get, really set on a certain vantage point. But I think, a way to keep ahead of things a little bit and to be progressive is to be able to kind of look at the broader sense of what is happening out in the world and what's successful for other people and what seems to be working. Have you found a lot of that from some of your other PR clients where you've been able to kind of look at an experience and maybe not directly, but indirectly, kind of see how that kind of seeps into the work you do as a manager?
I think so, because again, the way that the Strumbellas, the way that their single spirits took off, it was at radio in the U.S. And I'd been on I'm usually the Canadian indie publicist who, we have several calls on the PR side every week with different labels that we deal with, and you sort of sit there and it's the US people and some international people and then Canada, and you generally have you speak for about 30 seconds of the call, and you say okay, this is what's happening up here, because we're just a tiny country, so it's you report in. But I really was grateful for clearly what must have been osmosis of sitting on those calls for a decade, with a lot of great American labels and talking about radio charts and knowing how important certain markets are, because there would be this this emphasis on them on these calls. And I was really grateful for that when this happened, because I don't know that you necessarily, being from Canada, would have understood what some of those things meant, right? If you weren't already being exposed to that kind of stuff. And internationally too, just understanding, certain TV, when it would come up from Germany or something, I'd be like, yes, right away. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the one thing, that Daniel Glass says. He's like, you just said yes to every promo, that we brought to you, because you could tell that was going to be important. And, I think knowing a little bit of background and going oh yeah, that worked for, another artist. So, I would have been doing a campaign for, or feeling we better, that's a bit of a red flag, or something like that. I think that all of a sudden I was really grateful for all those hours on those calls, which can be really long and enduring when you only have this tiny component to give. But I kind of also really enjoyed that part of that too. So that was really helpful in bringing that into that sphere as well.
Right. It was a bit of a boot camp and crash course in ways you probably didn't realize at the time, but were able to pull from later on. You mentioned the mentor component with Arthur Mann earlier on the Ryko side. On the management side of things, as you kind of dove into this head first, were there any particular managers you'd worked with in the past or you had connections with that you were able to kind of, look to on that same kind of mentorship front and say, oh, this is, somebody I can have on call to ask this question or get this piece of input as I try to, navigate through some of the unknowns. Have you kind of been able to find some
Yeah.
support in that way?
Yeah, I'm really grateful. I think that the management community is so uh, strong and helpful to one another. And I think because everybody kind of has their thing going on, it's a little bit different than other components in the music industry where it can a little bit be, more smoke and mirrors and behind closed doors sort of thing because you're trying to get ahead of that other person or whatever. And with management, everybody's kind of got their own thing going on. So there's this openness that I think has been really great. And I have some really great friends that I had been friends with as a result of maybe being their publicist at a certain point. But there's a band here in Canada called Blue Rodeo, and their manager, Sita Cartier, was just an amazing mentor to me. She um, has kids, and so I'd often just live in my neighborhood, and I'd go over and be like, have dinner with them. And the kids would go to bed. We just sit at her kitchen table, and I'd be like, "What do you do about this? Or what about
Mm.
this?" And she again managed a big band, so she kind of also really understood that component for me too, of like, just logistics and functioning through, sort of the obstacle course. And I have some other great management friends, Michael Gorman, who manages Serena Ryder here in Canada, and people with immigration as well was like just a gigantic thing, going from Canada into the US.
Right.
It's just we have to do that too, right? And so figuring out that, and so I had some great friends that were really helpful doing that, and people that I watched, like that have a lot of integrity, and I had a lot of respect for, again, maybe when I was dealing with them on the publicity side of things, that I could turn to and kind of, I knew I was going to like whatever answer they gave me, and I could kind of craft that into my own way as well.
No, that's fantastic. And it is kind of it seems to me it's almost like a cycle. You were saying the community, not necessarily terribly competitive nature of artist managers. Because I mean, given that intimate nature and relationship, once that's set, is pretty much set. So, I mean, unless you're going after a very similar same thing, I mean, it's the competition is mitigated to some degree. So I've always found, at least, there seems to be an openness to that kind
Mhm.
of mentorship component of it, and it goes full circle in a lot of ways. I mean, I have taught uh, artist management in a couple different capacities, and I find it really rewarding to take the time in the same way that several people have done for me over the years, and try to at least give a certain perspective or answer a certain question,
Mhm.
because it certainly, I think, overall creates the best work that everyone can do, and certainly the best artist when you have, when you've been down that road for a moment and you have a perspective on it, and sharing that perspective might make things a little less abrasive or challenging for someone. It feels like it's just a good thing to do, and it's not dissimilar to artists, being supportive of other up and coming artists. And I think about the whole element of supporting an artist when you're a developing emerging artist to get in front of their audience, and then getting to a place where you're headlining, and hopefully you're
Mhm.
being equally as supportive and intentional and thoughtful with the people you bring out on, to support you, and put in front of your own crowd. There's a nice cyclical relationship there, that I think kind of
Exactly.
breeds, through the whole industry in so many ways. Well, one last little question here. I always like to pose, because it's, again, it's so hard to quantify in some respects, but I'm always curious to hear um, people's opinions on. I mean, how do you, with your artists, and maybe not for your artists, but certainly uh, to some degree for your artists, how do you quantify success? Because I know it's different artist to artists and people view it in different ways. But we certainly live in a society now, or I guess an element of the industry where, you know, a barometer could have been album sales before, and maybe it's streaming numbers now, or maybe it's, you know, tickets sold on the road. But at the end of the day, you know, some of those can be stripped away a little bit down to, hey, I made a beautiful piece of art, or disconnected with this amount of people. But there's always some element of wanting to kind of quantify it. So how do you have a tendency to have those discussions with your artist, and where do you kind of land with it to kind of make sure that, you know, things are moving forward and everybody's at a, you know, good spot with it? How do you tackle things like that?
That's a good question that I'll muddle through an answer because I'm not sure. I think, you know, it's sort of something that I think we do inherently and sort of naturally. And it kind of depends on the day. Because in a lot of
Right.
ways, you know, you can kind of get to the end of a few days and be like, oh, it's very intangible, you know, results sometimes. And then sometimes it'll take years, you know, to get anywhere. So I think that I always look for those little beams of light that come through the cracks, you know, of a fan writing in from Brazil, you know, for the first time. You know, we definitely sort of cherish that and celebrate it because it's like nobody knew us outside of the 416 before, or, you know, the 604 in terms of other bands that I work with or whatever. But, you know, it's like cherish that moment, or, you know, they have more of a crowd than they did the last time, or just connecting. I think social media, like, again, I think something that artists really enjoy and something that, you know, determines success is people saying that it mattered. You know, like, I think that music, you know, not to be wishy-washy, but like I think that music plays a really important part in people's self-esteem and in their, you know, ability to get up the next day and sort of fight the good fight in a lot of people's lives. And, you know, somebody just reaching out and being like, thank you for like helping me get to Friday. And, you know, that kind of thing I think is important. I think, you know, I think we can get too focused on metrics, and I really try to not do that with anybody that I work with, because for one thing, you just got to go do your good work, you know, like go out,
Hmm.
play shows, be real, be genuine, have a good time, feel like you're, you know, moving forward creatively. And that's a box that I absolutely insist has to be checked off in everything is it evolving this, you know, artist creatively, you know, because otherwise it takes a whole lot of money to not check that box off, and it takes a whole lot of other things, you know. They need to feel like they're like moving forward, and it's evolving into something stronger. And so I really try to just make sure like they're feeling like they can thrive, you know. And that's what I think people can get caught up in the other stuff a little bit too much, you know. Because also it's like the metrics change every day. One day Twitter is the most important thing, and then Facebook is, and then it's not likes anymore on Instagram, it's comments, and it's like, oh my gosh, we're just chasing our tail if we start
Right.
doing that. You know, it's like, you know what? Make good music, go get it out to the people that want to hear it, and, you know, I think that that's luckily, you know, that's the artists that I work with too. That's what they love. You know, like there's still nothing better than a great show, you know, so
Yeah, it's a great perspective. It's the small victories that compound, that keep you grounded, that help you see the bigger picture. And yeah, I think you touched on a lot of really great aspects of that. You know, I mean, if you're satisfied with the work you're doing, and excited to share that, it might not be immediate, but over time, that has a tendency to compound and really grow. And those are the things that when you start seeing success for it, you're a little bit more rooted in, as opposed to, you know, chasing, to your point, a metric that is constantly changing anyway. It's hard to get rooted if that's, you know, your goal that you're trying to achieve.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that that's you're set up for failure if you focus I mean, those things are important, but again, it's like those things will happen if you just go do what you're good at, and sort of let that flourish on its own.
Right, right. And I think that's true for artists as well as managers. You know, uh, do what you're good at, focus, and take good counsel, and work with people that you have a connection with and are passionate with, and yeah, with a bit of luck and patience and perseverance, things hopefully begin to kind of reach those benchmarks. You get those small victories to quantify a little bit of success along the way. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. Thanks to our guest, Joanne, and thanks to you for allowing us to occupy your ear space for a bit. I'd like to thank my dear friend Tony Miracle for both the theme music and graphics for Tough Love, and I wanted to dedicate this first season, as we have been thus far, to a truly inspirational manager who recently passed away, Elliot Roberts. Rate us, follow us, and above all, share this podcast with all your friends and fellow music industry and artist communities. It takes a village. You can reach us at chris@anhedoniamanagement.com. That's CHRIS@ANHEDONIAMGMT.com. Be well, trip up, get back up, and let's all learn as we go. Until next time.